Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for our session. We're going to get started. Today's session, the title is Using Zoom as a Student-Centered Software to Enhance Synchronous and Asynchronous Instruction to Contribute to Student Success. I'm Frank Petropolo. I'm an assistant professor in the Biology and Chemistry department, and I'm going to be joined by let's see, I don't think Dena chimed in yet, but Dena is going to be joining me today to conduct this presentation. Can everybody hear me? Okay, cool.
Frank, I'm in.
Okay, cool. I thought you were going to introduce yourself, Dena. That's all. Okay, everybody. So I'm going to start with the overview of this presentation, what we're actually going to be discussing. First, we're going to focus on the basic functionality of Zoom. Most of us have been using Zoom for a while now, but just in case anybody needs a quick refresher, we're just going to breeze through the icons on the bottom. We're also going to go over the process of connecting an external device to your computer so that you can screen share. I will go over that on both a Mac and a PC-based device. And then we're going to talk about some examples for using Zoom in both a synchronous and asynchronous type of format. So we're going to focus on some student-centered tactics, Q&A sessions, tutoring, using Kahoot, which if you were just in one of the last sessions, we actually just used Kahoot in the grant writing, so that was pretty cool. And then we'll obviously talk about remote and online instruction as well. We'll bring in how you can utilize Zoom for individual and group projects and how these all contribute to student success in the courses. So one question that I always like to ask myself is, why do we use Zoom? Why do we continue to use Zoom? From an instructor perspective, I find that out of the teleconferencing software that we have available to us, meaning WebEx, Zoom, Shindig, Microsoft Teams, I personally like Zoom the best. I think it has the best functionality. You can wirelessly connect a tablet. For example, I have my iPad right now, and I actually have the presentation on my iPad, if you guys can see that in my little picture. This is exactly how I teach, by using my iPad through Zoom, potentially, especially in a remote format, and it works very well for me. So that is very nice from an instructor perspective with that wireless connectivity. Also, it's a very intuitive program. When you click on one of the icons, it does exactly what you expect it to do. So that's a very nice process there. Now, from a student perspective, we've received a lot of the same feedback from the students. Students say that it's very intuitive, it works very well, they're familiar with it. It's not to say every single student knows how to utilize Zoom, but for the most part, I have not had too many students that have come to me during a semester and said, I don't know how to use it. The other thing is, it's just faster overall. If you try and open up WebEx, you try and open up Microsoft Teams, no matter if I use it on my Mac or my PC, those programs just seem to lag a little bit. And especially in the online environment, we've become so accustomed to everything being quick. And I want everything that I do in regards to my software to work when I'm ready to work. So those are just some basic characteristics of Zoom and why I utilize it, why Dena utilizes it, and probably most other people here are going to utilize it as well. So let's talk about Zoom being a student-centered program, because that's very important. So one of the first things in being student-centered, and some of these are more towards the course as a whole, and then using Zoom to support them, is being student-centered is going to be a tactic where you would tailor the learning experience with the students in mind. So when you're developing the course, let's start at that level. You want to think, okay, would a student be wanting to complete? Would the use of whatever I'm asking a student to do be outlined in the course? Would there be directions? Is it going to be very clear? So that really starts with the most basics and the LMS. And Blackboard is going to be the LMS that we utilize. So you've probably heard this in prior presentations, but especially in an online class, remote class, the LMS is going to be analogous to the classroom. The students are going to be coming in. Everything should be on a regular and consistent basis in the same spot. So if you have a learning module, for example, I personally make it a choice of mine and a habit to list everything in the same order in every single learning module. So for example, I have expectations at the top. That's followed by introduction. Then I have the readings for that particular module and the PowerPoints, et cetera, et cetera. So when they go from week 1 to week 2 to week 15, they know where to find everything, and it's always going to be in the same spot. But going back to being student-centered, just some things that we want to worry about, and especially through Zoom, say you are delivering a presentation. You want that presentation to be direct. And when I say direct, what I mean is we don't just want unnecessary info in there. If there's a lot of things that you're just plugging into the presentation just to bulk it up and make it bigger, that's not going to be a student-centered tactic. That's not in the best interest of the student. So I'm not saying that information should be cut out that's important and that is going to be needed in there to cover the objectives at the course level or the chapter level. But if there's things as you're looking through the PowerPoint that you have your presentation, if it's not a PowerPoint, and you say, you know what, I know this isn't on the exam and it's just something that's extra, that would be maybe something that you would look at and want to cut out. However, if it's something that really does support a topic that is important, or it's an application of a topic that it's helping the student better understand, those are the types of things that you want to keep in there. Another student-centered tactic is in regards to the assignments and assessments that you have in the class. You want to be direct on those again, test specifically what was covered in lecture or laboratory, going with your learning objectives, but you also want to provide graded and ungraded assessments. So that's a great student-centered tactic where you're going to be able to provide students with a lot of ungraded support. So one way I have utilized Zoom with this in the past is I've met with students, and in the laboratory for anatomy and physiology 1 and 2, we use a Pearson product. It's PAL 3.1 Practice Anatomy Lab. And I've actually met with students, and I've even done this in tutoring, and I've done this in office hours as well, where I've met with them and say they were having trouble finding out the muscles of the forearm. I actually sat down, logged into the program. I was able to share my screen, or they were able to share their screen, and we were able to figure it out together. So that worked out very well. Another thing that I utilize for my assignments, I use what's called Your Choice blogs. I actually give students a choice as to which topic they could write about for a particular chapter. Chapter 2 comes to mind in Anatomy and Physiology 1. There's 4 macromolecules. You probably have heard of these before: carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. I ask students to just pick from that list of 4. The first paragraph, they summarize what they actually, the topic that they pick. And then in the second paragraph, they are going to provide some type of application. For example, one of those things that they typically write about, if they pick lipids, I'll get a lot of students writing about diet and how a high lipid diet can impact the body in a negative fashion. So those Your Choice blogs, tying it back into Zoom, how do I accomplish that? A lot of times what I'll do is when I have question and answer sessions prior to an exam, I ask students, do you have questions in a particular area? And I know a lot of them, because it's a collaborative environment, have brought questions in from those blogs that they completed earlier in the class, and we go over it as a group. So that's a very nice tactic to utilize. And one other thing that I utilize, and this can be accomplished in a discussion board or through a Q&A session, I actually have sometimes, depending on which particular unit exam I'm utilizing, where you can have students write some questions for a test. Doesn't mean that you're going to make a test entirely of those questions that were written by the student, but maybe you pick a few from the entire class that could potentially wind up on the exam. So having students involved in that learning process is definitely a student-centered tactic. Now, moving down on the list, we have motivate students, don't put them down. On the first day of class, you don't want to come in and just be so blunt with the students that it's off-putting and that they want to withdraw right away. So For example, if I came in on the first day and said, this class is impossible, half of you are not going to do well in this class, that's very off-putting. We want to do the opposite of that. We want to say, okay, there's a lot of information in this class. I'm going to be here as the instructor the entire time. I'm going to be cheering you guys on pretty much. There's these external support services, X, Y, and Z. Please make sure you're utilizing them. It really depends on the modality of the course. So for example, in an online course, there's not a required synchronous portion of the class. So things like focus sessions that the A&P instructors do are more optional. But one way you can be student-centered is if students can't make it because they did sign up for an online course through Zoom, you can record those sessions and post it to your Blackboard course shell. The next thing is increased presence. And again, going back to Zoom, this is an excellent way to increase your presence because you can hop on Zoom at any time from anywhere. You need to meet with a student, and that really shows that you care. And I've had a lot of appreciation from students when I get an email and they say, can you meet quickly? And I'm like, yeah, let's meet within the hour. And we do that. And they're so appreciative of that. The other thing with that increased presence, with Zoom, you can record your screen. I've done this sometimes for my introduce yourself discussion board, where not only will I post a little bit about myself, I can also record a video. And then the last thing we have on the list is continuous change. Status quo is not really the best tactic in regards to being student-centered. You constantly want to implement new tactics within your course, especially new technologies. I'm a big proponent of professional development and emerging technologies. I try a lot of stuff out. Unfortunately, a lot of stuff does not make it into my course, but I do have a few rules for myself. I typically don't implement new technology or changes in the center of the semester. I usually wait until the next semester to implement those changes. And the other thing is, it's okay when things fail. Nothing's perfect. It might not work the first time you try something new. So I typically try a tactic about 2 semesters. I'll usually modify it if it doesn't work after the first semester. I'll see if I can get some results that I would like in that second semester, but I'll scrap the idea if I do not get the intended results, unfortunately, after that. So let's move in now to Zoom on a Mac or PC. This is the screen that you're probably all familiar with. We're in Zoom right now. I'm going to zoom in on the bottom. We have the mute, unmute icons on the lower left-hand corner. We have the start, stop video also on the left-hand corner. So those are pretty self-explanatory. We have security. This is an important setting. It depends really on what you're trying to accomplish in your class. I don't use this that much, but in this security setting, if you're not familiar, you can lock the meeting. So let's say you're doing an advising session, but your personal meeting room link is out there. You have one student in there and you're sharing some personal details like grades. You might want to lock the meeting. That wouldn't allow anybody else to come in. You can also check things off under this security icon, like allowing chat between individuals, allowing the participants in the room to share their screen, or allowing the participants to rename themselves on the participant list. So this is very important, especially if you are in a meeting and you're sharing your screen as the instructor and you're worried about a student maybe clicking on share screen by accident. You can disable the ability of students to share screens. On the participants list here, this is important because you can invite new participants or additional participants into your Zoom meeting. But more importantly, why I'm bringing this participants list up is I now instruct students to make sure that when they are logged in, that the participant list is going to display their first and last name. That's really important because not only can you see who and who is not inside the Zoom meeting at this particular time, I also use that for attendance, for example, during focus sessions to see who attended and who did not. The chat feature is next. The good thing from an instructor perspective here is you can communicate with students. You can receive questions during a lecture if it's a synchronous session. The other thing is you can share files here. So for example, when I do focus sessions, I've put the PowerPoint that I was using, or if I had some type of document I was using, I've shared it with the participants so that they can actually follow along more easily. I'm going to talk about share screen in a second on the next slide, so I'm going to skip that, but that's exactly what it seems. You can share what's on your computer screen or device. The next thing we have is going to be record. You can record to the cloud or you can record to your computer. The nice thing is with transitioning to the Panopto video service, when you record something in Zoom in the cloud, it's also going to show up in your Panopto account as well. We have closed captions. Unfortunately, Zoom doesn't have the same functionality of Microsoft Teams where it will automatically generate captions. You really are limited with your options here. So if there's an ASO student in your class, you might have to use a different teleconferencing software. The one option you have is going to be to close caption yourself as the person leading the meeting as you were completing the meeting, which is probably quite difficult, I could imagine. I've never tried that. Or you can have a third-party service. Rev does it, but that would have to be something that is paid for. So that's not always going to be a possible option there. The next thing we have are going to be breakout rooms. Breakout rooms are great, especially if you're doing more of a flipped classroom where maybe students watch some videos or they come more prepared to class, and then they can have their little sessions where you can actually design the breakout rooms and prior to the start of the Zoom session, or you can do it during the Zoom session as well. You can assign certain people in a room, or you can do it randomly. Last but not least, we have the reactions, which are going to be very helpful. There's the emojis in here, so you can get a thumbs up from your participants, or there's also an icon in here to raise your hand. So I find that very useful in class because a lot of students or a synchronous session, they don't want to just yell something out, and you'll see on the participants list a little hand raised, and then you can address the question that they might have. So the next thing we're going to do is focus on sharing on a Mac. So you can see right here, let's pretend that I clicked on share screen, and then this is the menu that is going to pop up once I click share screen. I didn't have any programs open at this point in time besides Zoom, but let's pretend I had Microsoft Word open. You would see a little box here that says Microsoft Word. If I had PowerPoint open, you'd see an additional box that said PowerPoint. If I had Mozilla Firefox, you'd see an additional box for that. There is a whiteboard that you can utilize as well, and you can draw on it on the computer. I don't use it that often. I've only used it 2 times because I use my iPad and it's just much easier to write because I have my Apple Pencil. Now, going back to the iPad, because this is really what I want to focus on, this is how I connect. And you could see it says iPhone/iPad via AirPlay. This is a wireless connection. And we're going to see on the image to the right in a second directions that will pop up on your computer screen once you click this. Now you can go the traditional method with connecting your iPad or iPhone via cable to your computer. Once you plug it in and click on that icon, your device, meaning your iPhone or iPad, is going to ask you if you trust or do not trust what is trying to connect with that device. So you would just click trust and you would just be hardwired. And connectivity wise, it's going to share the screen in the same way. It's just nice to have the AirPlay because it's wireless. So once you click on that AirPlay, this is the screen that you're going to get. This FP Home 5G, that's my home network. That's the name that you're seeing if you're wondering what that is. It's just telling you to make sure that your computer and your iPad are on the same network. Then what you're going to do is you're going to click on screen mirroring, which I'll show on one of the future slides, and then choose the device that you're trying to connect to. Now, before I show the screen on the iPad itself and how you would connect, I just want to switch over to what you would do on a PC to get to that step. So I didn't realize this until about 3 weeks ago because I've been using my MacBook, but now you can wirelessly connect your iPad to your PC just like you would with a Mac. In the past, the only option I had on my Surface Pro from CCM was to connect with the wire. So this is really a welcomed addition. So if we zoom in on the PC, you would just click screen share on the bottom. I've already done that in this picture. It's a little different from the Mac, but you're just going to want to select iPhone/iPad and then click share. And you're going to get a very similar screen where it's telling you to make sure both devices are on the same wireless network. Click screen mirroring on the iPad and then click on this particular device. So once we get to this step on either a Mac or a PC, what do you need to do on your iPad? So from the upper right-hand corner, where you would have the Wi-Fi logo, the do not disturb if you have it enabled, and the battery, you would swipe down. And when you swipe down, you're going to see that there is a screen mirroring icon. Once you click on that screen mirroring icon, it's going to open up the screen mirroring submenu. And then what you would want to do, if there's multiple devices here, you would just want to make sure that you click on the one that you are trying to connect to. Once you click on that, you'll notice on your iPad screen, or excuse me, on your laptop screen, whether you're using Mac or PC, I should say that device, not necessarily a laptop, the computer that you're using, there will be the iPad screen pop up in the center. You'll see a green outline around it. And then what you just have to do here is click off to the side on the iPad, and this little box will go away, and you can open the application that you want to share, and it will mirror directly what is going to be on your screen. So that's a very nice feature because it's simple, it's wireless, and it is going to work pretty effectively.
All right, so Frank just gave everybody a really great tutorial. He's our tech guy on how to use Zoom and how we can use it in our courses. So what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about how I've used Zoom in asynchronous instruction, so for fully online classes. So what we've got on the left here is the screen that Frank just showed you, right? This is what pops up when you log into Zoom. And on the bottom, there's a little circle record, which Frank had pointed out. It's right next to screen share. And one of the great things about Zoom, like Frank had mentioned, is when you record, everything gets automatically uploaded to your Panopto library now. So you can use Zoom to record your lectures like you had done in TechSmith. And so what we've got on the right on this slide are just sort of little modules or little links of recordings that we've done in Zoom that show, you know, here's your lecture, just like you would be face-to-face. There's some really great features that Zoom has. So like Frank said, it's very, very user-friendly. One of the other great things is that you can do that annotation. So Frank had mentioned that there's a whiteboard. If you don't have an iPad or a Surface, you can sort of highlight things and indicate what you're talking about directly on your PowerPoint slides if you're sharing your screen. You can also flip back and forth between screen share and just showing your face as a regular lecture as if they were looking at you face to face. So that's a really nice feature because a lot of the times in asynchronous classes, students don't get to look at the professor. So by having your face there, it's giving them another way to sort of just interact with you and relate to the class and the material. So one of the big things that I use Zoom for in my classes is oral presentations. And I know when we had first gone online with COVID, everyone's feeling was that you can't do an oral presentation asynchronously online, and you absolutely 100% can. There's just a few things you have to do sort of upfront in order to make it work. So obviously today's talk, we're using Zoom to do this, but you really need to have clear directions. So we've talked about having our learning management system really well organized. So I have a folder for oral presentations, and everything that happens, what you have to turn in, all of your directions are going to be found in that folder. So having those clear directions is really important to making these asynchronous oral presentations work. Also, you have to be really upfront about your due dates because this is happening asynchronously. students tend to put things off, and we want to make sure that they get their work done, get it uploaded, and have other students given the opportunity to watch their presentations and interact with those presentations. I also use group workspace and discussion boards, and I'm going to talk about how I use those to make these oral presentations really interactive and student-centered. The last thing is I do an evaluation. If this were in person, I would do an evaluation with the students. So how did your group members do? What was their participation like? And you can do the same thing remotely. So everything that you would do normally in a face-to-face class, you can absolutely do online using Zoom and Blackboard. So the first type of presentation I'm going to talk about is group presentations. And the class that I'm using as an example here is our Gen Bio lab. And in Gen Bio, we have sort of a preset list of topics that the students can present on. And one of the things that I like to do if this is fully remote is to sort of randomize the grouping. So you're not with your friend from another class or somebody you knew from high school. This really helps increase interaction. And one of the ways that I do that is by giving an assignment where the topics are listed and it's sort of first come, first serve. I give them a lot of heads up about when this is going to be due, but the students have to rank their topics of interest. So I tell them rank 1 through 5. So if you're the first person and you get to me and you want viruses, so viruses for obvious reasons has been a really hot topic in this class, you would get put in the virus group. And the reason that I have them rank 5 topics is not just, in case everybody picks the same one. I actually assign students groups to ask questions in, and I'm going to come back to that, but that's why I have that many selections for the student. So once the students have sort of picked their group and submitted that assignment, which is a graded little assessment that I give them, right? You get a point or 2 just for doing this step. I put them into a group workspace on Blackboard. So that's right on the left-hand menu. So I've got a little red box around it. So group workspace is a really great feature in Blackboard. You can see that all of the topics are on the side and that there's a certain number of members enrolled in each group. So these are smaller group presentations. So 2 or 3 students in the group, and in group workspace, the students can interact with each other. No other students are going to see their work. They can start to talk about how they want to break up the presentation, exchange information, and they don't have to go looking around in Blackboard to find their classmates. So this is a really helpful feature to get the ball rolling and having students start interacting with each other to get the presentation going. Now, obviously, once they've interacted with each other, they're going to need to record their presentation. And we know that almost everyone knows how to use Zoom, but we can't assume that. So I have a very detailed document that goes through how to set up a Zoom account, how to use Zoom for your oral presentation, and it sets it up step by step. It goes over all of the features on the bottom of the screen like Frank did with us in the beginning. So this is super important so that the students feel comfortable using the program and it gets their presentation formatted correctly. So on the right side of the screen, this is just a screenshot that I took of 2 students that were presenting, right? So you can see both of their little faces are up there, just like our faces are on the top of your screen or however you have it set up. And their PowerPoint slide is presented, just like ours is. So it's the exact same effect, except this is recorded. And they're going to upload that presentation to Blackboard. And it's going to be a very, very similar model as if they were doing it face to face. They're going to get the same experience, they're just recording it. So how I get the most interaction is by having the students upload their Zoom recording, which has to be saved as an MP4, to a discussion board. And I have the discussion board set up for the students. They have to find the title of their presentation, and then they're going to upload the presentation into the discussion board. So if you look at the bottom of the screen, you'll see oral presentation on discovery of cell theory. Right, that's where the students have to put their presentation. There's another discussion board in that folder, and that's questions for the presenters. And in group presentations, I do this a little differently. I actually have students ask a question before the presentations happen. So remember I said I have them rank 1 through 5. I pick another topic that they were interested in and have them do research on it and then submit in the discussion board a good, thorough question on that topic, right? It can't be what is a virus? That's really basic. Everybody's gonna cover that in the presentation. Has to be something where they've done some research and given a lot of thought to it. The reason that I have the students in the group presentation submit the questions beforehand is so that the students who are presenting can answer the questions in their recording, just as if they had done it in person. And the reason I have them do that is so that every group member can contribute. If you're just typing the question into the discussion box, it's usually a one-off where one student's going to answer it, and it's not really that collaborative group effort. So I really like to do it this way, and it also encourages the students to go out and do research on something that they're interested in and bring it back into the class and share it with other students. So I also use this for individual presentations. The only difference is in an individual presentation, for example, in my human biology class, I let the students pick whatever topic they are interested in as long as it is a relevant human biology topic. So the picture on the screen is somebody picked allergies and asthma. So in human bio, a lot of kids pick what they're interested in. And it can actually tie back. So Frank mentioned the introduce yourself discussion board. A lot of the students talk about why they're interested in taking human biology in that discussion board for my class. So allergies and asthma, chances are that student has allergies and asthma, and they're now going out and researching that topic and learning a lot more. So we're giving them choices and making sure that the course is really focused on what they're interested in. Just like with the group presentations, the students upload the recorded MP4 to a discussion board. The only difference is here, I have the students directly type the questions into the discussion board, and the presenter has to come back and read those questions and answer them. And I make sure that I give them a very set time frame. You know, your presentation is due on date X. You have to ask your questions by date Y, and a response has to be given by date Z. And that makes sure that the interactions happen. If you look at the top of the screen, right, I had 18 students enrolled at this point in the course, and there was 105 interactions that happened. So this is really, really interactive, and students are participating and they're interacting with each other. They're disseminating knowledge that they're interested in, and it works really, really well. And you do not need to be super tech savvy to do this. We're all using Zoom. Like Frank said, it's user friendly. And if you give them a document that explains how to use it, it works really, really well. And the students get almost the exact same experience that they do at giving presentations face to face.
So Dena did an excellent job discussing how we utilize Zoom for some asynchronous examples. Now I'm going to jump back into how we can utilize Zoom for some synchronous instruction or synchronous interactions as we go through these next few slides. So the first thing that we have is going to be remote course format. I'm sure that this is on everybody's mind since most of the classes have transitioned that were face-to-face to remote format. And you really can offer students with a very similar experience that they would get sitting in a classroom. It's just that they're now sitting in a little bit of a different environment. So first and foremost, what you're seeing here on the left-hand side of the screen is GoodNotes 5. And that is what I see on my iPad. You can see up on top, there's a toolbar. It's going to have the pen, the eraser, a highlighter. I can build shapes. There's a lasso tool where I can write something and then I can move it. There's a laser pointer. I can insert pictures. I can insert pages. I could change the colors besides just the red, blue, and black that are on here. I can pretty much go to an unlimited number of colors. I can change how thin or how bold the pen writes on the screen. I'm actually doing this presentation on GoodNotes 5 right now. I just have it mirroring, or excuse me, I have it just showing the presentation page, but I'm going to switch real quick so I can mirror my entire screen. Let's hope this works. Right there. Okay, so you can see now on my presentation, this is what I'm looking at right now. I'm actually looking at the toolbar and the presentation is under it. I can write on it, I can highlight something, or I can erase. And then what you guys are seeing right now is the presenter page right there. So we're back to the presentation. That's nice. It cleans everything up. It's just so that it's not distracting when you're clicking on different things. But going back to the presentation capability, this is a screenshot that I took from one of my courses when I am describing hematopoiesis. And you can see I was able to use different colors. I was able to write in terminology. I was able to use highlighters. I'm able to draw. So using Zoom to not only allow students access to your presentation, you can also record your presentation in a remote format for those who are not able to attend. Now, this is just my opinion, but in the remote format, the students are supposed to be regularly attending the course. So in this type of format, I don't intend to give every single person the recording at the end of the day, because that might hurt attendance in the course. But if somebody was to come to me and say, you know, I have a legitimate excuse for why I couldn't be here, or my internet wasn't that good in the middle of the presentation, it kind of cut out, fine, I'd have no issue providing that student with the recording for that class. So I actually use GoodNotes 5 when I'm lecturing face-to-face. I have my presentation. I've tried to remove as much text as possible so that the students are actively participating in the class. That's my same intention with the remote format modality. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have the slide. I'm going to be talking. I'm going to be writing in things as I move through my presentation. Compared to an asynchronous online course, there are some benefits to this. The students are held more accountable. They're going to be able to ask questions to a live instructor, which is going to be nice. I can call on students, which I can't do in an online class, unfortunately. And I'm also able to provide some personalized reminders at the end of class. Let's say that there's some new research that just came out about COVID-19 and it's applicable to A&P. I can actually put that in where maybe in my online course, I tend to not put in dates in my recording, so I don't have to go back every semester and re-record the videos. I tend not to put in information that might potentially change. So there are some benefits to definitely using this remote format. Last but not least, before I move on from this slide, what I did was when I made my instructor's addendum for this semester, I put in the Zoom information. So I have Tuesday lecture for Bio 102, 2 p.m. to 3:15. I put in the Zoom link, I put in the meeting ID, and I put in the passcode. Then I put in the Thursday lecture, 2 p.m. to 3:15, the Zoom link, the meeting ID, and the passcode. I set them up as recurring meetings, just so that students can click on the same link every Tuesday. Students can click on the same link every Thursday. And I'm going to talk about office hours first on the next slide. I've also done that for office hours. I use that this whole past year. So last fall, last spring, and that recurring meeting worked very well versus a different link where they don't know which one is the correct one to use each week, and it gets confusing and they're not in the right place. So starting off with office hours, I've already talked about the recurring meeting and providing the link. With synchronous interaction, I'm not calling this instruction, I'm calling it interaction. Even in this virtual environment that we've been in for a year and a half now, students are able to come to office hours regularly scheduled a specific day or days and time or times each week, and they're able to ask questions. They're able to get feedback on assessments if they need it. So it really does help being there for them. The next thing I want to talk about is tutoring. There's 3 main ways that tutoring can be utilized for synchronous interaction. The first is just plain old one-on-one tutoring. The students come, they're prepared, they have questions. Maybe we went over cellular respiration and they're not entirely clear on it. So you can provide some additional support. The other thing with the tutoring being remote format, I'm able to share my screen. Students are able to share their screen. So if they're looking at something, I've had students in the past, for example, say, I found this additional research on a website, but it contradicts what you've said. And I'll say, either send me the link or in tutoring, you can show me and we'll go over it and either why it's correct or maybe I made an error. Okay, because that's always possible. The next thing that we have is in regards to tutoring workshops. So Biochem is going to offer a few different workshops through the tutoring center. One of the ones that I've held in the past with Professor Burns was effective test taking strategies, study strategies and effective test taking techniques. And workshops are a very student-centered tactic that we utilize because what we're doing is we're not in that particular workshop, for example, we understand that not everybody knows how to take a test. We understand that not everybody knows how to study. So we're not just in class giving them the information and say, good luck, figure it out. What we're trying to do is we're trying to help students understand maybe why they don't do good on a particular type of question on an exam. Why are some students better at essays versus multiple choice? And we try and level the playing field and get students at all aspects, especially of the test taking strategies and study skills at that same level, the best that we possibly can. The last thing that we utilize the tutoring center for is a group-based session. We call them focus sessions. They're for anatomy and physiology. And what we do is we pick specific topics that we know students struggle with, and we don't go and reteach the information. Yes, there might be a brief review of the information, but our main purpose of the focus session is going to be more application of material and ways to categorize the information, ways to study the information. So this screenshot right here is actually an example of one of the focus sessions that we had in the spring semester. It was integration of the central and peripheral nervous systems. In the lower left-hand corner, I tried drawing a diagram and color coding it with sensory information, motor information, and integration, which would be the brain and spinal cord areas. So you can also see on here, I use different colors. I'm not the best artist, but I tried my best here. And this might not be the best example of application. This was more towards the beginning of this focus session and just that background review before we got into the application. The last thing that we have on here are going to be Q&A sessions. I hold Q&A sessions prior to each laboratory practical exam and prior to each lecture examination. That really provides the interaction, especially in an online course. And I do record this. They're not mandatory, but they're recommended. It provides that collaboration, though, that's sometimes missing in that online environment. So I typically go over 3 things, but I have gone over other things in the Q&A sessions. I typically start off with going over a document called the Proctored Exam Expectations and Guidelines. That's for online exams. It's the testing station requirements, the minimum technical requirements, directions for accessing the exam and feedback. If it's a face-to-face or remote class, I'm going to be utilizing a little bit of a different document, similar language. It's just an exam protocol document. After I go over that information, I move into, this is the format of the test. It's 80 questions. You have 75 minutes, mostly multiple choice. There's going to be a few short answers. There's going to be a few matching, whatever it is. And that changes from exam to exam. And then the last half of the Q&A session, I make it student focused. I say, okay, what questions do you have either about the class or the material? And I get a lot of good questions. And this is where I was saying it's a little different each time. Sometimes students will bring up a your choice blog that they completed and say, can you elaborate more on this topic? I didn't quite get it. Or I've had students come to Q&A sessions for lab. Actually in A&P1 last fall, I had students with their specimen in the dissection pan, and it was a sheep brain, and they were actually asking when everybody else left the Q&A session, could they go over it? Because unfortunately that one had low attendance. I think only 2 people attended, but they could have did that for the entire class and led a nice student-led discussion. So the Q&A sessions are nice because it's not just me talking. They get their input, they get to make suggestions, and it's really helpful in the virtual environments that we've been in. And then the last thing I want to talk about for synchronous interaction is going to be utilizing Kahoot. Kahoot is a game-based platform. You can utilize, it depends on your account. It is a paid service, the one I have, but you can utilize multiple choice questions. You can utilize true, false. You can utilize what's called a puzzle, where the students will have to put something in the correct order. You can integrate this now into your slides. It works more like Google in regards to your slides, not PowerPoint. I haven't used that yet. On the left-hand side here, you can see I was actually sharing the Kahoot that was open on my iPad screen versus on the right, I was just sharing the screen on my computer. This is a great program. Students are typically familiar with this. They use this a lot of times in high school before they get to college. So it's very similar to Zoom, where you can expect most people know how to use it, but just don't expect everybody knows how to use it. They get to use their cell phone or tablet in class, which they seem to appreciate, because of the rest of the class, they shouldn't have it out. But I typically use it either at the beginning of class to see if they can recall the information from the prior class, or I sometimes use it after I cover a difficult topic before I said cellular respiration. So I can maybe have 5 or 6 questions, 10 questions after cellular respiration. Did I teach it effectively enough where they understood what I was trying to convey? I have used it in the past as well for lab prior to a practical examination. So I'll put information, say, from a bunch of labs, 4 labs, and then if we have some extra time, the last class before an exam, utilize that as a review. So every semester, this goes over very well. There is a free Kahoot where I think you just have multiple choice and true false questions. If you haven't used it, I would say give it a try, because when I do introduce it in a class and then I don't use it for, a few classes, I always get questions. What happened to the Kahoots? Are we going to do those again? So very good reception. So let's circle back around. We've gone over some asynchronous interactions. We've gone over some synchronous interactions. Let's just talk about some inequities that you could potentially have in Zoom, because that's something that's very important. The first thing is, we don't want to assume, and we've been saying this, that every single student is technology proficient or that they have the technology that they actually need. So one of the best ways to reduce this inequity is to just provide directions for Zoom. That's very important. And it doesn't have to be an elaborate set of directions. It could also be providing students with a document that Zoom produced themselves, or there's a few URLs that you can pull directly from the Zoom website that walks students through how exactly they could utilize Zoom if they're unfamiliar. The other nice thing is CCM does provide the licensing for Zoom, whether you're using it as the instructor or the students need to utilize it, as Dena was saying, for their group presentations. We don't get cut off at the 40 minutes. We can go on and on and on as long as we want with Zoom. So we're not passing that cost on to students, which is very nice. The other thing is, in regards to technology proficiency, we do want to be adaptable as instructors, meaning we should be able to use different teleconferencing softwares besides the one we like or are familiar with. So for example, I've had students in the past that did need the closed caption. And when I met with those students, they requested the closed caption. So I actually used Microsoft Teams due to the live caption. So I guess it's important for both faculty, staff, everybody, students, to be adaptable and to be able to utilize the other technologies, but just keep in mind that you need to provide the support for those other technologies. And then I've also had students who this past summer had an issue with their laptop where it broke, and CCM was able to provide them with a loaner laptop, a Surface, so that they can continue with class, which was very nice. The next thing on this list, some spaces are just not set up for Zoom. I remember when we went virtual about 1.5 years ago, a lot of students didn't like to have their camera on, and that's understandable. Students don't want you in their home. Maybe they're in their car, maybe they're at their workplace trying to come to class. So what I've done is, so this is no longer an issue, I've actually provided directions right in my instructor's addendum. Here's how you would utilize a virtual background in Zoom. Here's how you would utilize a virtual background in WebEx. So that's very important. You might also have issues with internet as a student. I know I've had issues at my house or when I was on campus where I didn't have a strong enough internet connection. So maybe they need to have their camera off, meaning the student, so that they can just follow along with the rest of the class. So I make it important in the beginning of class where I stress this. If you have any type of technical difficulties, please feel comfortable coming to me no matter what it is. I'm going to try and make sure that you get the best experience that you possibly can in my class. And if somebody was like, listen, my internet is not that good, I can't have my camera on, I'm not going to be offended by that. I'm going to say, okay, if I need to call on you, you might need to turn your camera on or at a certain time if you're talking, and they understand that and they'll try. And I really do appreciate that. And then the last thing is with the space not being set up for Zoom. I kind of said this before, where maybe not in a remote class, you want to record, or you want to provide the recordings to everybody all the time. But if somebody came to you and said, listen, I was at home, my family was there, it was loud, I couldn't hear the lecture, there's going to be instances where maybe you do want to record. Well, you should always be recording, but or that's what I plan to do. But you might want to provide those recordings to students for certain instances like that, especially when there's interactions in the spaces that they're trying to connect from.
So a couple more inequities that we have are, like Frank mentioned, there are some accessibility concerns with Zoom, primarily the closed captioning. Also, if somebody had some visual issues, Zoom might not be as easy to see for them. The best thing that we can do in those situations is if you are recording to upload your presentation or your lecture using Zoom, is you can send it to a third party and use Rev, which is a closed captioning service. Or if you wanted, you could go in and edit closed captioning yourself. It's just rather time consuming without those live captions that other virtual softwares have. There's also the fact that everybody's really zoomed out now, right? We've been in Zoom meetings all morning. We've been in Zoom meetings for the last year and a half. So everybody's sort of tired of Zoom. They're tired of logging in. So they like log in and tune out. Or what happens a lot of the times with students is if they see that they're going to be watching something on Zoom, they'll put it on in the background and then they'll go sort of doing their day and tuning it out. And that's really not what we want. So we want to make sure that all of our presentations are really interactive and that we're engaging students so that they don't have that Zoom fatigue that everybody's experiencing.
And one other thing, just before we move off this slide, I just thought of this now, with being zoomed out, another feature that you can utilize in Zoom is the polling feature, which is great because maybe you're having asynchronous sessions like the Q&A sessions, and say you put it on Tuesday at 4 p.m. You might want to use that polling feature, put some times in there. Our next Q&A session, what time would be better for you? So that could be something that can be utilized as well to help with this zoomed out aspect.
So one of the things that we can do, since synchronous and asynchronous instruction with Zoom have advantages and disadvantages, is we can sort of blend them together. Even if you're teaching online, having obviously live office hours, or if you want to have a question and answer session over Zoom, just integrating both into your teaching will help students. So for instance, office hours, right? Like we said, we can have those recurring meetings. If a student comes to you for extra help, maybe not in office hours, you can always record your session with that student and provide it with them so they can go over it again if it's a concept that they're really having difficulty with. So it's sort of like they get to record the lecture as if they were in class, which is also something that helps with accessibility. So if you have a student who has, an accommodation for recording your lecture, you can always record it for the student on Zoom and then send it to them. So this blending of asynchronous and synchronous instruction over Zoom is really your best bet, because it does help create that student-centered view.
Well, we would like to thank everybody for coming today. If you have any questions, I know we're running a little short on time. We have about 5 minutes left. We'll take questions, but you could always send us an email and we'd be happy to answer if we run out of time.
Hey, Frank.
Yep.
Great job. you and Dena and Scholler. I wanted to know, you talked about recording to cloud or the computer. Do you have a recommendation as to which one of those is best?
The videos are typically pretty large, so unless you have a lot of space on your computer, I try to utilize the cloud just so it doesn't take up space on my computer.
Okay, and so that's just as easy to, when you send an email to someone who missed a lecture, let's say, and you want to attach that, that's just as easy to attach from there as it is from computer, because I've done it with computer and it's, so what do you think?
Yep. It's very similar. You can go right onto the Zoom website under recordings on the left-hand panel,
Yeah.
and you would just get a link very similar to how you would with recording to the computer.
Okay.
Yep. And you could also download it at any time. Say you did want a copy, you can download it from the cloud and then even leave it in the cloud so it's in 2 spaces. That would really make it safer so it doesn't get erased by accident.
Yeah. Oh yeah, one more thing. Someone, I don't know which one of you said that you could save it on Blackboard too. Where do you save it under some?
So what we do is there's a tools function, and Panopto works the same way. We've been using TechSmith tool, but since we're going to Panopto, on the tools menu, it's I think 2 over or 3 over from where it says build when you're in a module, and it says tools. You would click Panopto and it would put a link that you can name whatever you want. So say introduction to chapter 1. Once the link is in there, you click on the link and it brings you to your Panopto account, and you just select which video you want to link to that particular item that you just put in Blackboard.
Okay. So one more thing. Can you save it to the same place you save other documents in Blackboard, like the syllabus or notes or things of that sort, or it's too large for that? Or
no, the nice thing is it's actually not hosted on Blackboard. It's what you're doing is you're just creating a placeholder in Blackboard, and when you click on that link, it actually takes you to Panopto. And in regards to Blackboard, I have those links everywhere. I have it on my syllabus page. I have it on my welcome start here. Actually, that one's a hyperlink, but I have it under learning modules in multiple spots. So you can drop it in almost any place that you would like on Blackboard.
thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions?
Where's a good place to learn what Panopto is?
Panopto CTL has done some training on it, and I'm sure that they're going to do more in the future, but I'm pretty sure they posted what they recorded already on the bug in Blackboard.
Frank, can you clarify what's the bug so everybody knows?
Oh, yes. So in case you're not familiar, on Blackboard, it's called the Blackboard Users Group. And a lot of the recordings that CTL does for, say, Zoom, functionality, Panopto, or any other programs that we have, they'll typically post the videos on there. And then there's also directions on there for how to use specific features of Blackboard, like ILP integration when you're entering grades, would be an example of that.